One. And good evening, everybody. We are live again for another enthralling and exciting episode of D Live, the Convo series. It's been a little bit of time, a couple weeks or so since we've been on. I know during COVID we were on all the time, and well, it's still COVID, I guess, is going on. But during the height of the lockdown, we were on kind of nightly, Monday through Thursday, and now it's just going to be as we get folks scheduled here and there, and we've got a great guest tonight who I'll introduce here momentarily. In the meantime, we'll give everybody just a moment to start coming online. We've got a few people with us already, and number one being a Wendy, I know you would be very interested to know who our first guest joining us this evening, our mutual friend Joyce Powdrill, who
Hi, Joyce.
who actually helped get us connected and made this happen tonight. So always glad to have Joyce with us. So we've got a few people joining us right now. We'll go ahead and kick it off. So everybody, first of all, please during these times, it's so challenging, especially for our candidates that are on the ballot in 2020, as Wendy is for Common Pleas Court Judge here in Hamilton County. Typically in a campaign, the candidates are out at events. Raising money is always a challenge, of course, but especially during these times when a lot of folks are out of work and other things. And so one of the things we want to do is just help to get the message out. So to the degree that you all can share this, please hit the share button to various groups, anybody that you would think would be interested, or share it to your own page. That would be fantastic and help Wendy get the message out. So our guest this evening is Wende Cross, and she is running, as I mentioned, for Hamilton County Common Pleas Court. And so we're going to learn more about that. But of course, one of the cool things about the show, what we do is learn about the background of folks and interesting people here in Cincinnati and Hamilton County. And so with that, Wendy, thank you for joining us this evening. And we want to hear your story. We want to hear what Wende Cross is all about and what brings you here. So thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I've watched your episodes, and so I'm just really excited to be here tonight. So I am a local girl. I consider myself a local girl. I went to Princeton High School. Let me just back up first of all. So I was actually born and raised in Orange, New Jersey. And so lived there, and then my mom moved here to Cincinnati to have help with me and my little sister. She's a single parent, and so we moved out here with where my grandparents were and my great grandparents.
Now, what year or how old were you in elementary school then, or high school, or?
10 years old.
Okay.
So that's why I say I'm a local girl, because I was 10 when I moved here. And so I went to Bond Hill Elementary School, and then I went to Walnut Hills High School. And so because I lived with a single mom, we moved a lot. Moved to a lot of Cincinnati neighborhoods, and was at Walnut Hills for 7th grade until almost 11th grade, so second half of 10th grade year. And my mom had to pull me out of Walnut Hills because she got a better job, and that was out in Sharonville. And she could not afford to transport me back and forth to school every day. So I had to transfer from, all my friends and everything I knew. So I had to go to Princeton High School, which ended up being a blessing in disguise. But it wasn't at 16. It didn't feel like a blessing. And so I transferred, went to Princeton High School, and it's kind of hard in 11th grade to meet new friends, because by then everybody has made their friends and all of that. But so we moved to Glendale, actually, and I went to Princeton High School, graduated from Princeton High School, went to Miami of Ohio, where I got my bachelor's degree in public administration and political science because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. And so that was always the goal. But,
So let me interrupt you for just a moment. First of all, another illustrious Miami grad who I was chatting with the other night, who I think you know as well, our friend Yvette Simpson.
oh
So
yeah.
there are some great women in Cincinnati that have gone to Miami. But how did you know? And I'm always curious about this. How did you know that you wanted to go into law, or how was that? Was there something in your family, or how did that come about? How did you get that desire?
Well, it's really interesting because I didn't grow up with any lawyers in my family. So I didn't have anybody that modeled being a lawyer in front of me at all, except that I moved around Cincinnati so much, and the neighborhoods I was living in, that we had to live in because of our income.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of people had to go to court. Lots of people had to go to court or got arrested. But I used to spend a lot of time with my grandparents because mom, worked sometimes two, three jobs. And so my grandparents were really engaged grandparents. And I spent a lot of time with them. And they used to watch Perry Mason. And I watched hundreds of hours of Perry Mason. And I loved it. I loved it because that's what they watched. And I just, used to love watching him, be a voice for the marginalized and, the unprotected. And so I thought, I'm gonna do that one day. That's what I want to do. I want to be Perry Mason. I want to be the female version of Perry Mason. And that's where I really developed my strong desire to go into law. Um, my grandparents also told me a whole lot of stories about the civil rights movement and Jim Crow South because they were from Alabama. And so just spending time with them and hearing all those stories and the things that they had to endure, and watching Perry Mason being that person who will be the voice for people who can't speak for themselves, I thought that's that's it. That's what I want to do. And so I knew um, at a pretty early age that's what I was going to do. And then the other thing is I was raised in the church, and so I was used to service because in the church you do a lot of service. And so being with my grandparents a lot, watching Perry Mason, hearing all their stories, and them taking me to church all the time, um, I knew I wanted to do something to help people.
Right.
So helping people, Perry Mason, here I am.
Right.
And so it's been very, very rewarding being in the law. So that's how I got interested.
So you went to Miami for undergrad. Um,
Uh-huh.
is that right? And then on to law school. Where did you end up then?
I was local. I went to Northern Kentucky in Highland Heights, Kentucky. I went to Salmon P. Chase,
Right.
Northern Kentucky University. Just a local girl. I just loved staying in this area, staying close to family. And so went there. And after, because it was a Kentucky school, most of the recruiters were from Kentucky.
Right.
And so I was recruited by a Kentucky law firm in Lexington. And that's where I went. And in 1992, when I graduated law school and got my degree, I went to a law firm that in 1992, I was the first Black female associate ever in the firm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in 92. There was a Black male partner, and I was the associate. So it was very interesting being in Lexington in a firm where I was the only Black female at the time.
So especially thinking of and now and maybe when we get up to the present day, we can talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on in the country and the world today in that regard. Which unfortunately you've had a very a bad experience here recently on a social media platform like this, so we can touch on that. But what was that like? We talk about in the workplace and cultural sensitivity and those types of things. Did you face adversity in that way? Or what was that like in the early '90s, being it sounds like the only black female in the office? What type of things did you face, if any?
Well, it was more, I would say it was more sexism than racial adversity, because they welcomed me into the firm. And the one wonderful thing that they did was they paired me up with the first female partner of the firm. So got the benefit of all of her struggles and all of her strength and all of her wisdom as the first African American female, because she was the first female partner. And so she took me under her wing like a mother, really. I was so blessed. Her name is Leslie Vos, and I just owe everything to her. She taught me more than my counterparts at the time. She took me places and exposed me to people and put me in rooms that my counterparts, other people who had graduated at the same time, they was like, "How are you getting to go there? How are you going here? And what do I was just exposed. She just really exposed me to so much, because she knew, being the only black female in the firm, that I would have some struggles. But turns out with her, I really didn't have many struggles in that respect. It was more because I was a woman that I was expected to perform at a certain level, not necessarily because I was a black woman, but because I was a woman.
Right.
So you had partners back then saying, calling you honey and sweetie and things like that. But and judges, I would go to court, and judges would say, "Oh, well, oh, here comes a little lady," or "Here comes, oh, come here, sweetie." And they're like, "Sweetie, I'm a lawyer."
Right. Right.
So, but most of my dealings were in Eastern Kentucky, and so even though the firm was in Lexington, our clients were in Eastern Kentucky. And I remember one time where I was literally run out of town. I was in Kentucky. I had been to court, and I was on my way back to Lexington. And I remember a truck full of white men. We were in a pickup truck, and they were at like a Dairy Queen or something. And my car had a little red Toyota, and my car passed it. And I kind of saw them, out of my peripheral, but I was just driving, and they saw me, more importantly. And they chased me.
Oh, wow.
In their pickup truck. And I was terrified. I was terrified because I thought, what if they catch me? What's going to happen? But they didn't. And I got back to the firm and reported it. And they began to say, you know what? Maybe you don't need to go to Eastern Kentucky so much alone.
Right.
So, but experience. So.
Right. And and the shame of it is that here we are, 30 years later, almost 25 years later, and we see this craziness continuing today, and fomented from the top. And I won't get on that. I won't get on my 45 rant right now. I will save that for another time. But but I think those are the kind of stories that we like to hear, and that are instructive, and that I think helps to probably give you a strength and to grow and to build off of. And so I think it's instructive to hear those types of things. I did want to mention, I forgot at the beginning to mention to everybody, if you have any questions for Wendy, please feel free to drop those in the comments. I mentioned we had Joyce stop by and left a comment. And Kareem Moncrief stopped by and says that she loves you so much, Wendy, and thank you for supporting the youth. Of course, Kareem is very active with the youth in our community, so we certainly appreciate her. But if anybody has a question or a comment, please feel free to leave those in the comments, and I'll keep an eye on those going forward. So one of the things that most impressed me about you, Wendy, is your resume. So not only were you in private practice then starting out, and now you've hung your own shingle. You're in private practice now as well for yourself, but you've served as an assistant U.S. attorney as well. So tell us a little bit about that transition and how that helps just kind of around your law career, especially now this new role on the bench.
So in Lexington, I told you I had this amazing partner who was my supervisor, and she would go around and tell people about this associate that she had. I mean, I ended up being a star associate because I worked hard. I wanted to.
Well, I mean,
I wanted to,
of course,
well,
of course, you were the star associate. We can see that, right? And anybody that knows you knows that.
I wanted to work hard for her because she took me under her wing, and she was always so proud of me. So I just worked really, really hard for her, and on her cases. Well, she would tell people about that, and one day I went home, and you remember when we used to have voicemail, not like the little voice recorders,
Yep.
and you could get a message on the what is it called?
Your
The
answering
voice
machine.
answer machine.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's been so long. I heard of them.
So I know. So I went home, and one day there was someone from the U.S. Attorney's Office that called and said, "Hi, I'm so and so, and I'm from the U.S. Attorney's Office. We'd like to talk to you." I'm like, I didn't do anything. What's going on? And uh, and so I called back the next day, and they said, we've heard about things that you've been doing. We've seen your work here in Lexington, and we'd like to talk to you because we have an opening. And I thought, okay. So I went, and I did not know at the time the job was in Covington, and I'm from Cincinnati. So went to the interview, went through a couple of interviews, and they said, we want you to come and work for the government. We want you to come and work for the Department of Justice. At that time, there was a recruitment for more diversity in the Department of Justice. And so I got a job with them. I was really excited about it because I was only out maybe 2.5 years, and that's really unheard of to be recruited by the government being out of law school in 2.5 years.
Right.
So I went to work for them, and I worked not only in Kentucky in the U.S. Attorney's Office prosecuting high-level criminal cases, but I also worked in the Cincinnati office. So I've worked, and there's very few of us that have worked in both offices, but I did get an opportunity. So I was assistant U.S. attorney for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And when I started out, it was very interesting because I was the only one who was doing civil work and criminal work. So when you come into the U.S. Attorney's Office, you usually do one or the other. And I was doing half criminal, half civil, which was, again, a blessing in disguise because it just made my experience more robust. And so did that for 10 years, and it was just a really really great opportunity. Litigated a lot of cases, and I felt like I really was helping the larger community in prosecuting cases for the government.
Right.
But you know what, Derek, that job led me to understand that so many defendants at an early age were already behind the 8 ball. Because I thought some days I thought, how is it that you're facing 30 years in prison? Then when you look at their history and their background, and you see it started from when they were a juvenile. And I thought, wow, some of these men and women didn't even have a chance in life. And that really kind of led me to thinking about after 10 years that I think I want to go and go into the private bar and level the playing field for some of those folks. And that's why I opened up my own practice.
Got you. And I think the other thing that you mentioned to me that really is going to help you on the bench is that you've had that experience, from the criminal side as a prosecutor, and also from the civil side. A lot of folks don't realize that in Common Pleas Court, that it's not just the felony criminal cases, but you have pretty big civil cases as well that you hear. So you had kind of well-rounded in that regard. But now that you're in private practice, and you're based in, or your office, or you're in Avondale, is that, or
so I used to
you're in
be
Bond
there.
Hill?
Well, I used to be in Avondale.
Okay.
I was right next door to the Urban League. I owned the building that was right next door to the Urban League. But now I've been on the bench in juvenile court for the last 8 years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So so you're a magistrate in the juvenile court. So now you've got that experience as well, and so it sounds to me like you're very well prepared for this next step. So touching on that, and I want to talk a little bit about just to remind folks how, in terms of how we elect the judges. And one of the challenges is that there's no D or R on the ballot. And so that's why, and I think from the Democratic Party perspective, and I was pretty active in 2018 in our the coordinated judicial campaign in terms of getting people to recognize that we have this drop-off that happens where people vote, especially in a presidential year. Obviously, anybody that's going to vote, probably 99% of the people are going to vote for the president. And then as you get on down and then actually turn the ballot over, many of the judicial races are on the back. And so it's important that we know our slate. But let's talk a little bit about that. What do you see? And you've had a little bit of a insider's view for 8 years. It's quite a while in the courthouse as a magistrate in the juvenile court. But what do you see in terms of improvements, things that we can do differently? We know in Hamilton County that for really the entire existence of the courthouse in Hamilton County, it's been controlled by Republicans and has been kind of inbred in that way. You probably wouldn't use that term, but but I would. And they use it as a training ground. There's a lot of nepotism that goes on between the prosecutor's office. So we had Fanon Rucker on talking about that, where there's only 2 or 3 out of a couple hundred employees in the Hamilton County prosecutor's office. There's only 2 or 3 African American employees. And from the criminal justice perspective, and you kind of touched on that a little bit, what are some of the things that we can do differently, especially as from being an endorsed Democrat, and kind of having that view of the criminal justice system, how it is at times inherently unfair. Especially if you're not rich and can't afford, the rock star lawyers and those types of things. How do you approach that? What's maybe different that Wende Cross can get in there and do things better so that they feel when they come in front of you, no matter what happens, that I got a fair shake, no matter what my background is?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. At a basic level, Derek, we have gotten away from considering each other's humanity in the court system. It's just law and order for a lot of people.
Lock them up and throw away the key.
It really is. And I think that, and that's not the business of the court. The court is to hold the people accountable for their actions and to administer justice, period. Now, sometimes justice looks like you got to go to jail, right? But at a basic level, there has to be a cultural, a paradigm shift of the mind, because we have gotten so far away from considering the humanity of the person standing before you. We have gotten so far away from that. We've gotten so far away from respecting the parties that are in front of you. And so, at a basic level, when I talk about justice and justice being on the ballot, I'm talking about the fair, equitable, and balanced treatment of individuals. Period. It's real simple. But we've gotten away from it in trying to be law and order, lock them up, we don't care. And let me give you an example of that. So, um, today I was talking with someone, and the person had a DUI. It was a first time DUI, and but they have children, and they have responsibilities with their children, and so the judge gave um, privileges, pretty liberal privileges. Now there's a conviction, but there's privileges to still drive. Now the prosecutor was very upset about that. But if we don't take into consideration the person's humanity, that they're a mother, that they still have to go to the grocery store and buy food for their children, that yes, they made a mistake. Yes, they are held accountable for that mistake. But then crush them so much so that they can't go to the store and buy groceries for their children or take their children to daycare so they can go to work and continue to have a roof over their heads.
Right.
We really have to. I'm hoping, it is my hope, particularly with the slate, that we are going to usher in a paradigm shift of respect and humanity and integrity in what we do. There has to be a level of accountability as well. I think for too long, there hasn't been any accountability for the bench, from the bench. The public is the one who actually put you in office, and we're beholden to the public. Um, and so we have to um, understand what the needs of the community are, what's best for the community. I really am encouraging people to make sure they flip that ballot and vote for the judges, because no one more than the judges and these local, some of the local races, the prosecutor, um, impact your family more than anyone else.
Right.
There's a huge impact that judges have on the dynamic of the family. We have the ability and the authority to remove people from the family. And so, um, we impact the community significantly. And people have to understand the role that judges play so that they know I better flip that ballot and see and know who I'm voting for and know why I'm voting for them.
Well, and that's a great point. And actually, I'm not sure who I heard. I heard this the other day. I thought it was a great idea. And that was what we should actually do is flip our ballot over to start and start at the bottom on the back and work our way up, because you're going to ultimately get there anyway. But I think that's one of the challenges for us as Democrats, and certainly here in Hamilton County and probably everywhere, is to make sure to the extent possible that there is no drop off, that as many folks vote for Joe Biden and whoever his running mate is, as vote for Wende Cross for judge. And so that's on us to make sure that happens. And of course, we've got on the party's website all of our endorsed slate already, and that graphic is already up. So we need to share that around and do those things to make sure that everybody knows. Because what I heard in 2018 is people saying, well, the last time I went in to vote, I flip my ballot over, and there's usually, if I vote a straight ticket, I look and there's no D or R for these judges. I didn't know that.
Right.
And so, now I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who, and maybe I'm flipping a coin or doing other things. So, so that slate card is so important to have that handy. And of course, doing our research, but getting to know who all of our Democrats are. And that's part of the reason why we're having these conversations. So, that's a great point that you make. And, one of the things I'm passionate about is public transportation, one of my big issues. And we don't necessarily think about, and I think that's a great point that you made, that somebody gets a DUI or, they lose their license for whatever reason, or they're trying to get to work. They have to have a car because our public transportation isn't what it should be. But I can't afford the insurance, and then I get a ticket and I lose my license, and now I have a warrant because I can't afford to pay the ticket. And
Yeah,
in the criminal justice system, I was just trying to get to work.
that's right.
And so
That's right.
sometimes we lose sight, and so you could say, well, they drove without a license. That's it. It's a first degree misdemeanor, 6 months in jail, lock them up, throw away the. And I'm like, no, they're just trying to go to work. So how do we fix the system to make sure that that people aren't in that situation? So, and meanwhile, I don't know why people don't know not to call me while we're on the show. Like, from 7 to
So
7:45, not available. But putting those things in that kind of a holistic context, I think, is very important, and a lot of times we don't connect those dots. So I think that's a great point that you bring up.
I love the idea of flipping your ballot first. Vote for the people that impact your life more immediately first.
Right. Yeah.
And then
it's our local, all of our local races, local elected officials, and the national stuff and the statewide stuff gets the buzz, but it's truly the folks here in our local level that impact us the most. So
so true. Yeah. Hey, are you going to tell your viewers about our wardrobe?
Oh, yes, this is one of the most important things. We are color coordinated, aren't we? I love it. Totally by accident, I might add.
Well, we had the same color on earlier.
That's right. I had to go and change my shirt, but now we're color coordinated here for your. Is there a story behind that's an interesting color? Let's talk about that. And that's super interesting. How did you pick those colors?
Well, I wanted blue because of Democrat. I wanted blue, right? And I just thought that the maroon looked more regal.
I like it. Regal. I like that.
And when I think of court, that's what I think. I think it should be. I think of it in terms of its regalness.
Right.
And I know that Justice Melanie Stewart used these colors when she ran as well, and I just was really drawn to them. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to use those colors too.
Well, I like it. They're very fashionable to the point that I had to go and change my shirt and make sure that I was color coordinated. So I love it. I guess I'm OCD like that. But hey, we've still got a lot of folks joining us here. We've been on for about a half hour, so we'll wrap it up here pretty soon. I did want to just remind everybody, please share the post if you would, help us get the message out about Wende. And also, I will post a link to your website. Now, one of the weird things, talking about the politics behind a judicial campaign, is that you still need to raise money to run a campaign, and these yard signs and all of this stuff doesn't buy itself, right? But it's weird because you're in this scenario where you're actually not allowed to personally ask for campaign donations. So I will ask on your behalf. Everybody needs as soon as this is over, go on Wende's website, which we'll post in the comments here, and just drop her a little Scooby snack, a little donation on the website will be put to very good use. But she's not allowed to ask, so I'm asking on her behalf. So appreciate everybody helping out with that, because it's not easy raising money, especially these days. So with that being said, do you have any other plans? Anything else for the bench? Anything from the campaign perspective? You've got a great campaign manager. Brooke is awesome. Brooke Smith. A lot of folks know Brooke, and so she's hits the ground running. It's how she does.
Yes.
Anything you could tell us about that?
I want to say that, everyone sees COVID-19 as a major interruption in our lives, and it is interruption. But from my perspective, it's more of an intervention that has happened. Now, I'm not thinking about all of the deaths and the sickness, because that certainly is very tragic for all of the people that we've been losing. But the circumstance of what it's doing to how we're living our lives now and how we are doing justice now, um, I think it's an intervention because many of the reforms that the court and people, proponents of reform, have wanted to do with the common pleas, municipal court, and around the country, they're beginning to happen.
Right.
They're beginning to listen. So, one of the things that was big for me was there needs to be more transparency in sentencing. We have mass incarceration of Black and Brown men right now in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, but when COVID-19 hit, many people were being released if they were nonviolent, if they were low level, offenses. Um, and many of those people are doing well while waiting their case to be resolved. So, what do we learn from that? We learned that maybe they shouldn't have been in the first
In the first
place.
place, right?
Right? And that's part of some of the reforms, transparency in sentencing. How are we sentencing? I don't want, and it shouldn't be that if you come to my courtroom that you receive one sentence for an assault, but you go down the hallway and you get a different sentence for the same offense. It shouldn't be. So how are we sentencing? There should be more transparency. Right now, Ohio does not have any type of database that keeps track of how judges sentence. Well, that's how we get to mass incarceration. But now there is a big push for more transparency and even bringing some creation of a database in Ohio for judges to be held accountable for how they're sentencing. So I see the way our lives are after COVID, post COVID, is really starting to help some of the reforms that we all have been trying and pushing for years.
Right. Well, that's a
Yeah.
very interesting point. It leads me to a couple of thoughts. One is we saw because of COVID, there were a lot of folks who were just released from the jail, and at a point where you're looking at in the Hamilton County Jail and overcrowding, and all of a sudden, what are the outcomes of that? Do we really need to have all these folks locked up? That gets into a question about bail and bail reform, right? That if I
Right.
can afford to, if I have $500, I can get out. If I don't, then I sit locked up
Don't get out.
for weeks or months. And so, what's the
Yeah.
fundamental fairness of that? So there's all of these kind of when you start looking at the holistic criminal justice system and not just the police. Now we're learning, and we'll see what happens with a city like Minneapolis, really just breaking the model and starting from scratch. And so we'll
Yes.
see what happens with that. What are the outcomes? See the Los Angeles Police Department now as well looking to go to more of a community-based responder approach.
Mhm.
And we'll see how that works out, and then what the best practices are that come out of that that maybe we can replicate. And so we're seeing this, and it's being kind of forced upon us. But hopefully there's some good that comes out of it, and some positive changes.
Yeah, I I think we're going to get a lot of positive changes that come out of it. I want people to know I am not anti-police. I am not anti-police. Um, I have friends who are police officers. I have loved ones who are police officers. One of my mentees is a lieutenant in Cincinnati PD, and so I'm very fond of the police. I'm not anti-police, but there has to be some reforms. We understand that, and at an institutional level, right? And so I just think that where we are today, post COVID, and as well as some of the civil unrest that's going on around the country, is bringing about some of those reforms. I think we're going to be stronger, better, and wiser as a result after all the dust settles. I really do.
Wow, that's I love that. Actually, I think it's a great closer. So with that being said, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Wendy. Very powerful powerful stuff, and bringing us back from your formative years and right up to today, and what the future holds in these times that are so challenging and changing. But I think that's a very positive take on it, and I love that message. So really appreciate everybody joining us this evening. Like I said, I'm going to go and drop Wendy's website in the comments. Go on and leave her a donation, and please share this post to help get the message out. We're going to have some more great guests coming up in the very near future. Of course, I'm focused like a hawk on a number of things, but particularly on our great Democratic slate of judicial candidates that we have in our entire criminal justice system. So we're going to be looking at that. This post actually go up on my YouTube site. Derek Bauman, you'll be able to pull that up on there. So we'll have this in perpetuity on YouTube, and of course all my social media at Derek Bauman. Wendy, any final thoughts or comments or suggestions or marching orders for us? How else can we help you in your campaign between now and November?
Well, I really would invite everyone to go to my website to learn a little bit more about me. I would love to, and just leave an email too. I would love to, I love meeting people. And so we are having all types of virtual meet and greets. And so just stay tuned. I would love for you to go to my Facebook page and like it so that you can keep abreast of what's going on with our campaign. We're doing honkin' waves, and we need volunteers. And so I would really love it if people would join and get the message out.
No, that's fantastic. And again, you can sign up to do that on Wendy's website, and we'll leave that in the comments here momentarily. So Wendy, thank you again. Thank you, Joyce, for getting us connected. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in this evening for another fantastic episode, D-Live, the Convo series. We're going to have more great guests like Wendy coming up soon. So have a great night, everybody. Peace and love, Cincinnati, as always. Thanks, Wendy.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.